Hi, everyone. I'm Rosemary Miller here with David Jeans, a senior writer here at Forbes, here to tell us about Google's former CEO, Eric Schmidt's $1 billion philanthropic mess. Thank you so much for joining me today, David.
Thank you.
So, David, could you tell us a little bit of background about Eric Schmidt and Schmidt Futures?
So Eric Schmidt was the longtime CEO of Google before transitioning to his role as chairman around 10 years ago. He built up a massive fortune that currently today is worth around $20 billion, as Forbes has estimated. But around the time that he looked at leaving Google around 2017, 2018, he was preparing an exit from there. And he started, with his wife, Wendy, they were starting to think more about what his philanthropic future looked like. They've since built out an entire empire of philanthropic endeavors, but Schmidt Futures is by far the largest and the most active. It has dozens of programs and partnerships with high-profile institutions like the White House and Oxford University's Rhodes Trust. It's also, funded a lot of fellowships and built more or less a brain trust of interesting people across the technology space, science space, also some national security stuff as well. So they've done a lot of really interesting work since launching, I think, in 2018.
Well, David, the $1 billion philanthropic mess, those are your words. Why did you coin it a mess?
So what we learned through our reporting recently was that there's been a significant amount of upheaval at the organization. They employ dozens, more than 100 employees. What we learned in speaking with some of these employees is that a number of things have happened recently that has created some uncertainty across the workforce there. And it's significant because Schmidt Futures is one of the most significant philanthropic operations, that operates in and around a lot of AI policy space with the government. So we understand that the CEO, Eric Braverman, he was, effectively had to leave the organization in August. That followed an internal investigation. We also know that there had been more than a dozen programs that Schmidt Futures oversaw that are either being sunsetted or spun out of the organization or just cut altogether from the roster. We've also seen, some layoffs starting to occur, and we also know that other employees left once the CEO also left. So there's been some all hands meetings. There's been a lot of internal communication, but it's leaving the workforce there rather unsettled, and it's been a tough time.
So how is this impacting operations and relationships?
So there is a number of very high-profile partnerships that Schmidt Futures maintains that have been called into question about what the future of those are. So there's one program called the Quad Fellowship, which is seeking to provide fellowships to young people across a number of different countries. It's a partnership with the White House, and they've been planning to spin that program out of Schmidt Futures' control for some time, and what we understand is that that's something that Schmidt Futures won't be involved in anymore. There's a second program called Rise, which is another fellowship program set up with the Rhodes Trust, which is connected to Oxford University, and that whole sort of scheme is to fund teenagers' sort of dreams, like 15 to 17-year-olds, see if they can fund their ideas, and a lot of the messaging around that has been like funding their ideas for life. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but what we also learned through our reporting was that is another program that is under review. So its future is uncertain, and Schmidt Futures' involvement in that program is also uncertain.
And so could you tell me about the decision to pull its backing from the Crisis Response Initiative at the very last minute, right before its launch, right?
Yeah, so what was interesting about Crisis Response was it was a program that the organization was working on internally to help funnel corporate funding to humanitarian aid groups at a time of crisis. And it was part of a broader initiative that the UN Security Council was spearheading with a number of other organizations. Mm-hmm. And what we learned, this is sort of indicative of the disruption happening at Schmidt Futures right now. We learned that Eric Schmidt was supposed to give a speech at the UN Security Council in September. This had been something that UN Security Council members had spoken about publicly, told reporters about. It had been talked about in press releases. And then, a few days before that event, the organizers there learned that Eric Schmidt would not be appearing. And what we learned was that actually that had to do with the fact that Schmidt Futures was planning to end its, financial backing and, oversight of that program. Mm-hmm. And what we, also saw from that was like that obviously caused, some disruption there. And when I spoke to Schmidt Futures about that, they said that Eric actually had never fully committed to that event. Mm-hmm. They instead said that he had another commitment for Schmidt Futures that same day. So
let's talk about his time. That's the perfect transition. How has Eric Schmidt's ventures and other things affected the time he puts into Schmidt Futures?
Yeah, one thing we learned was that while Schmidt Futures had sort of launched in 2018, it was something that he'd been very focused on, and obviously it was a huge program for his entire philanthropic ecosystem. As time went on, COVID occurred, Ukraine occurred. There has been a number of things that have taken, other parts of his attention. This was, according to multiple people who work close to him. So he spent a lot of time working on Ukraine initiatives. He's also spent, significant time working. He wrote a book about AI with Henry Kissinger. That was, another sort of thing that he's focused his attention on. He held several government advisory roles, including on the National Security Commission of AI, and that was something that also consumed him. And so the other thing, and there was one other thing that we learned that he was spending significant time on, which was a company called Steel Polo, which was like a tech accelerator that he committed about $100 million to. And that was a company that he'd started with a young entrepreneur called Michelle Ritter. And that was also a woman he was dating at the time they launched that company. And that was something that he did spend a lot of time working on, as Michelle had told us for a previous story that we'd written.
So from spending all this time in other ventures and all the changes he's made in his companies, the layoffs, all of this backing out of the crisis response initiative last minute, how will this impact Schmidt's Futures' ability to fulfill its philanthropic goals?
Yeah, I think there's a huge question mark over the future of Schmidt Futures. Again, when we spoke to Schmidt Futures, their representatives, they told us that they are planning to announce new initiatives, and there's some indication that they're, either doubling down or changing pace for next year, and they seem, somewhat excited about what's to come. But I think that until we see what unfolds, that will, I think we'll be able to determine closer as we get along.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, David.
Thank you.
Absolutely.